This week on Instant Boxing, school was in session at the World Boxing Super Series. David Benavidez makes a case for being the top super middleweight in the world, and Danny Garcia starches Brandon Rios with one punch. Let's go! Welcome back to Instant Boxing. I am your host, Albert Baker. Make sure you follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at Instant Boxing, and also follow the new Under the Hand Wraps at UTHW Boxing on Twitter and at Under the Hand Wraps on Instagram. It was a big weekend of boxing. World Boxing Super Series, we'll start it off there. Class was in session. St. George Groves was the teacher. As soon as little Chris Eubank Jr. walked in, he looked inside his backpack and asked him, "Did you pack a lunch, son?"
You mean you eat other people's lunches?
Eubank Jr. said, "No, I didn't pack a lunch, George." And George said, "It's gonna be a long night then."
We're in for one wild night.
George Groves soundly, roundly, no matter how you figure it out, outboxed Chris Eubank Jr. over 12 rounds, won wide on all three cards. Eubank Jr. didn't have any answers for movement, didn't have any answers for the combination punching that George Groves was giving. Eubank Jr. swinging wide for the fences, looking extremely amateurish. It was a very poor performance, but it was indicative of the level of competition that Eubank Jr. had been starching and blowing out. The last time he had a step up against a non-European level, against a world-class level athlete, was against Billy Joe Saunders, and
you lose!
We all know how that ended. He lost to Billy Joe Saunders, had another fight against a world-class super middleweight this time in George Groves, and
you lose!
The same results. George Groves is a world-class super middleweight, had a very close fight with Badou-Jack. You could say that he won. You could also say that he lost that fight. He did lose that fight, in fact, against Badou-Jack, but George Groves owns a win over James DeGale, who also is a world-class super middleweight. Groves moves on to face the winner of Callum Smith versus Jurgen Brammer. Gonna be a good ending to the super middleweight portion of the World Boxing Super Series, the cruiserweight division. Very, very exciting. This World Boxing Super Series thing, man, you gotta love this. I love tournaments. Tournaments are great. They're always a good thing because you get to see the best fight the best, unify some titles. Unfortunately, not all the best super middleweights are in this tournament. You do have George Groves, who's a very good super middleweight. You have Callum Smith, who's an undefeated super middleweight. And you have Jurgen Brammer, who is a very good European super middleweight. So this is an opportunity to gain some exposure globally. I just wish it was televised in the US. However, with the success of the cruiserweight division, the YouTube numbers are going up, and it's a boost to the super middleweight division, which the US has some super middleweights that could benefit from fighting some of these guys. So it's a good thing in the end.
Hell, I like you.
Caleb Plant dominating Porky Medina, Rogelio Porky Medina.
The funky Cole Medina.
Same Porky Medina that David Benavidez stopped last year. Plant looked good in doing this. Soundly outboxed him. Won every second of every minute of every round. The fight was never in doubt. However, here's the only downside to Caleb Plant's victory. He never went for the kill.
So you're a killer!
And in not going for the kill, it showed that he was content and not providing excitement. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Win ugly, don't lose pretty. Biggest rule in boxing. However, Medina wasn't exactly, and it was clearly evident, the same Medina that came in against previous opponents like David Benavidez or J. Leon Love or any of the other good fights that he'd been in. Medina was wearing a knee brace, indicative that he suffered a knee injury. His foot movement was indicative that he had a bum leg. That's not to take away anything from Caleb Plant, because I think whether or not Medina had a good leg or a bad leg, Plant was going to outbox him. Just because of the styles, it was going to be hard for Medina to even think about winning this fight. However, Plant, with his boxing skill, which is at a very high level, needs to have that killer instinct. He needs to have something or some type of combination punching that's going to add to the incentive of watching him. Because after that performance, it was hard for me to think to myself and to believe I want to see Caleb Plant fight again, because I didn't want to see him fight again after that.
No, sir, I don't like it.
Which is kind of hard to say because I want to watch all boxing, but it wouldn't hurt me if I didn't watch him fight again. However, with the win, Caleb Plant becomes the #1 contender for the IBF, sets him up for a showdown with Caleb Truax. Caleb Plant will probably beat Caleb Truax, go on to fight one of the other super middleweights. I could definitely see a fight between Plant and David Benavidez in the future, which is probably one of the plans that they have going on. I wouldn't doubt it because I can tell the future.
Into the future!
Yeah. In the main event of that, Devin Alexander took on Victor Ortiz. Yeah, that's right. No, this isn't 2013.
I told you a long time ago, you...
But it was actually a pretty good fight. Fight exceeded my expectations. Victor Ortiz fought hard. Devin Alexander fought sharp. I thought Devin Alexander won the fight. He landed the crisper, cleaner punches. Ortiz was aggressive. However, he did get in lulls and little funks where Devin Alexander was able to pick him off from the outside and look good doing it. At the end of the fight, I thought Alexander was probably up by 2, maybe 3 rounds, and it was ruled a draw.
'Cause I'm blind.
I didn't see this. One judge had it for Victor Ortiz and the other 2 ruled it a draw. That's bananas. If you scored that fight a draw, number 1, you're probably related to Ortiz.
You gonna turn your back on family?
Or number 2, you were probably not watching the fight. Devin Alexander clearly won that fight. It's sad that he got robbed, but I mean, let's be honest. What does it do? This draw does nothing bad for Alexander because everybody already thought Alexander won it anyways, and he works with Al Heyman. So Al Heyman's he's a potential future opponent for Sean Porter, Lamont Peterson, Keith Thurman, Errol Spence. Okay, so that it's not going to hurt Devin Alexander. Victor Ortiz, on the other hand, he's going to be fed to any one of those guys, or if they're smart, they're going to set up a fight between Victor Ortiz and maybe a Brandon Rios, or Victor Ortiz and go outside of the operation and try and get him a fight with maybe a Lucas Matisse, or, you know, drag Ruslan Provodnikov out of retirement, or dig up some grave and find somebody else for him to fight. But there's still things out there for Victor Ortiz. I just think it needs to happen sooner rather than later, because had he been fighting continuously, like I'm talking once every 5 months, maybe even 4 months, I think Victor Ortiz could have looked a lot better. He didn't look terrible, but it did look like it was his first time in the ring in about a year. So let's get these guys back in the ring quick. We get it. It was a draw. There's nothing we can do about it now. It's over. But if we don't get Alexander and Ortiz back in the ring quick, they're only going to get older and they're going to not perform as good as they performed against each other.
We don't have a lot of time.
On Showtime, opening the televised card, Yordenis Ugas starched the new Ray Robinson. I'm not too sure if it's cool when a new fighter or a young fighter takes the name of an old fighter and tries to make it theirs. And they don't even try and do anything snazzy with it. They just say the new.
Didn't even try.
Anyhow, he's not too new anymore. Yordenis Ugas dropped Robinson in the first round with an overhand right. Fight was getting a little good. It warmed up. Ugas was clearly winning the rounds. Robinson would have his moments, although he looked hurt throughout the entire fight. And then in the 7th, an overhand right from Ugas put Robinson on the mat. Robinson would get up, beat the count, but it wouldn't matter as Ugas would pounce on him with a flurry of punches. He just kept punching until the referee jumped in to stop the fight. Robert Byrd, although did take about 2 seconds longer than I would have liked him to stop this fight. Robinson was clearly hurt and Ugas was landing big shots. Byrd jumps in, saves Robinson. Ugas wins. It wasn't necessarily a big fight. It wasn't necessarily for all the marbles. I think Robinson was ranked 11th and Ugas was ranked like 14th. It wasn't necessarily a big fight, but here's why I love these fights. You have 2 fighters on a similar level of skill. They're both very good fighters. No one's really mistaking them for the top tier of the division. However, these are fighters that are chasing an opportunity or a crack at that tier in the division. Even though they've had a couple of losses, they're still very capable of producing good fights, and they did produce a good fight. It's good to see fighters with a few losses that can still produce good fights get an opportunity to be televised, because when you put them together, they're at the same level of skill. They made a good fight. Ugas and Robinson definitely performed, and it set the tone for what was a good card on Showtime by PBC. So let's see Ugas again. He doesn't necessarily have to get a title shot, but bring him up. He just beat number 11. Let's see him fight 9, 8, maybe even 7 on that IBF ranking. He's climbing his way to the top. It's a good thing to see. Let's see him again. In the co-main event, David Benavidez put on a clinic against Ronald Gavriel, somebody whom he was facing in a rematch from a fight 5 months ago in which Benavidez had won a split decision that he was knocked down in the 12th round. Not so in the rematch. In the rematch, it was all Benavidez. Gavriel barely even showed up to fight. Benavidez calling him a one-trick pony, and during the fight, that was about all it was. Benavidez firing shots from all different angles, using the jab to set up the right hand. Would jab, move out, move in, fire an uppercut, move out, fire an uppercut from the other angle. It was a thing of beauty to watch. Benavidez's poise really showed. The guy is the youngest champion in history in the super middleweight division. He's the youngest active champion to date. For being that young, the type of skill that he has and the things that he does in the ring with his jab, moving to an angle and then moving to another angle, countering after making you miss, the things he does are really impressive. And if you're not paying attention to what you're watching, you're gonna miss it. But these are calculated things that he's doing on purpose. These are things that his muscle memory makes him do on purpose, that he practices. It was a good, solid performance. Ronald Gavriel's not necessarily the best super middleweight in the world, but he is a world-class super middleweight. He just so happened to meet one of the best super middleweights, if not the best super middleweight in the world, and there just wasn't any way he was gonna win it. Gavriel can go on and maybe have some exciting fights with other fighters that fight more along his style. I'm interested to see David Benavidez fight another world-class super middleweight like Zudulo Ramirez.
I like that.
I'll pay good money for that. I'll pay good money to watch him fight George Groves.
I like that.
I'll pay good money to watch him move up to light heavyweight.
I like that.
There's a lot of stuff we could see David Benavidez doing. There's a lot of upside to him because he's so young. He doesn't have any problems making the weight right now. It looks like he could dominate for a very long time and then move up to light heavyweight and dominate there even for a while. This is a good time to watch the super middleweight division. In the main event on Showtime, you had Danny Swift Garcia taking on Brandon Rios. This is a fight that I thought was going to overperform from the beginning. And by overperform, I mean Rios was going to overperform and Danny Garcia was going to underperform, thus making it an interesting matchup.
When I'm right, I'm right. And when I'm wrong, I could have been right. So I'm still right because I could have been wrong.
And I was right. Danny Garcia came in, looked like he had a little bit of ring rust on him in the early rounds, still boxed very well, used a good jab, moved his feet left and right, looked a little bit like the Danny Garcia that fought Lucas Matisse, which was a career-defining fight for Danny Garcia. Rios got the motor going, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounds, started pushing Danny Garcia to those ropes, pounding him away, getting that little buzzsaw effect going on. Landed a lot of really good shots, and then in the 9th round, Rios fired a lazy jab out. Danny Garcia, boom, right hand over the top of it, clean to the chin of Brandon Rios, put him down, head back, eyes rolled up, body collapsed onto the mat. Brandon Rios did get up like a warrior, beat the count. However, when Kenny Bayless called him to him, Brandon Rios was seriously wobbly. Kenny Bayless doing the right thing, calling a halt to the action. Brandon Rios loses by KO. Danny Garcia picks up a good victory, although to the diehard,
I live for this shit!
the yous and eyes that watch boxing vlogs on YouTube and go to all the boxing websites and scour our Instagram, because that's how we scour. We even get this face too. Oh, get the fuck out of here. That's how we do. People like us, we look at this win like, well, you were supposed to win. And if he didn't win impressively, it would have, even with a win, it would have been a loss for Danny Garcia. Unfortunately, Brandon Rios did come in shape. Brandon Rios did show that there is still a future for him. May not be at the top of the division, but you don't need to be at the top of the division to be in entertaining fights. Brandon Rios still has some options out there for him. Victor Ortiz and Devin Alexander. They're not going to be at the top of the division, but they could make an interesting fight with Brandon Rios. Lucas Matisse, who's a WBA belt holder. I don't think he's at the top of the division anymore. Not with his last performance against Tewa Karam. There's fights out there for a guy like Brandon Rios. Maybe even a fight with a mauler like Sean Porter would be a good one for Brandon Rios. He's just not going to be at the top of the division anymore. But that's fine, because I don't have to see two guys at the very top of the division to want to pay for a ticket. I like to watch good fights. Diehards, people like you and I that watch vlogs on YouTube, we just like to watch good fights.
Damn good stuff, sir.
I'd rather watch a really good fight between two 10th ranked contenders than watch a really bad fight between the best fighter in the world and the next big thing. But that's just me. That's all the time we got for you this week. Come back next time. Make sure you comment down below. Tell me what you thought of this week's fights. Tell me what you think about what's coming up. You're still commenting. Yeah. See you guys next week.